So one day I decided to fill my storm shelter up with ball pit balls, but first I had to clean it. I swept it up for a minute until it looked like this. It was a little bit better, and then I got the ball pit balls. And I dumped them all in, and it looked like this. So I went in and laid down. It was pretty cool. I threw the balls in the air, and then I started trying to make it into this little hole. I missed, and then got close, and then kept going until I got it. Then I threw it at that hole, chilled a bit, and jumped in. And here's what it looks like with the door shut, just an underground ball pit. Let me know what else I should do. So one day I got a comment that said to turn my brother's truck bed into a pool and swim in it, and I've already done this for YouTube, but not really for TikTok, so here you go. I filled the pool up with water, and then got in it, sat down, and we took off. And it was pretty cool at first. I put my head underwater, and that was cool. I came up, and then just chilled and enjoyed the ride. It was all pretty chill for the most part, and then we went kind of fast, and I also splashed out some water. Then we went back home, and I got out. What else should I do? So one day someone commented telling me to put my giant hamster ball in the water, so I'm going to do that, but I pushed it through this fence and walked it out to the pond, but the fence had knocked a hole in it, so we had to repair it, and then I got in and got in the water. And I couldn't really move very well, and my biggest fear was going through the hole. I slipped a lot and also just laid down, and then I slipped some more and couldn't move for a while until I accidentally made my way over these branches. And I was trying to run the other way in fear of moving into them, but I couldn't. And eventually I did just float into shore and then got grabbed and got out. Like if I should jump off this bridge with it. So one day someone commented telling me to take my giant 580-pound rubber band ball back to the pawn shop like old days, but it's too big, so I'm going to take all this random stuff in this little rubber band ball bag.
What happened to it? Did you put it in water?
And I told him it was a different ball, then showed him a picture of the big one.
Gosh, how big is that now?
I said 580, and then he said I should just put it on eBay. And then I moved on and asked him what he'd give me for this thing.
About $50 in rubber bands, $30.
And I couldn't sell it for that, so I had to move on to this ball.
Super high. Wow, yeah, that's cool. Did you get this at like Chuck E. Cheese?
And then I told him the price.
$16. I paid $8 for it, so I wanted to double my money.
Oh,
Yeah, we didn't end up making a deal on the ball either, so I moved on to this tiny rubber band gun. And I threw him a high ball number.
$200.
He gave me a weird look, so then I just moved on to the last item.
Magic, basically.
I said it was super rare water repellent spray, and I wanted a lot of money for it, but he didn't budge, so then he tried to sell me some stuff, including these cool shades. So one day I decided to take my giant 110-pound rubber band ball back to the abandoned water park that I took it to before to run down this slide, back when it was 70 pounds. And last time we did it, people yelled at us, so we had to find the owner this time to get permission, and we found this house. It was right beside the park, so we knocked on the door, and no one answered, so we kept looking around until these kids came up. They went and got their older brother, and we asked him, and he said,
A rubber band ball down a slide.
Go ahead, man. All right.
and we thought we were good to go until he said this.
I'm not supposed to be out here.
And we didn't know what he meant by that, but we didn't care because he gave us permission and we were still going to send it. So I carried the ball all the way to the top, and it was pretty cool looking up there. Here's the drone shot. And I decided to do this aluminum foil ball first. I pushed it off and it kept on going and then stopped. Here it is in the drone. So I went out and got it, but then the drone cam picked up on a car driving by. And after that, I heard a bunch of yelling right when I was about to launch the rubber band ball. The full video is on my YouTube, Dylan Ayres. So one day I went to the party store and got a bunch of giant balloons and a helium tank, and then went home to see what I could make fly away. I already had 2 blown up. I blew up the first red one, tied it, and then I blew up the second blue one and tied it. And now I had 4 balloons. And then I twisted and taped all the strings together and tried to lift up a weight, but it failed. So then I tried an apple, and it worked. After that, I had an idea to tie a box to the strings and send something away. I trimmed up the box and forgot the 4th balloon. So I tied it on and then went outside and taped a Tesla Hot Wheel to the box and tried to send it to space. And it went down, so I ripped off some cardboard and it still failed. I ripped off some more and it went to my roof, then fell off. I let it go a final time and it took off and left on into space. So one day I saw a TikTok where they tested flex tape, and I wanted to test it out for myself, so I got a jug of water, filled it up, I cut a square of flex tape out, and then stabbed this thing, which took quite a while, but eventually I got a hole in it, and then I slapped the flex tape on. And it worked pretty well. There was a small leak, but a little bit of rubbing and you got it out. And next I decided to test a 50-pound weight. I put the flex tape on, and it couldn't get it, so I decided to move to 45 pounds, and it got it up, and held there for quite a while. This is some strong stuff. So one day I went out to the Walmart as seen on TV aisle to see if it all really worked as it does on TV. I browsed around and ended up getting these glasses, this dog brush thing, and some flex tape. And I'm even going to break a skateboard in half to test the flex tape, but I got it all, and it started with this glove thing. It is apparently supposed to remove this much hair from a dog, and my dog doesn't shed that much, but I'm going to test it out on him. I brushed him for a minute with it, and at the end it looked like this, so not really. Then I got out these up-close glass things. I don't know, it's supposed to make things bigger. And I tested it on this print, and it made it bigger. And then I got outside and tested it in the real world, and I felt like Logan Paul back with the color glasses, and it made this tree way bigger. It was amazing. I'd never seen the real world this close. And then I got out the flex tape and broke this skateboard in half. I then tried to line it up back together and put the flex tape around it and wrapped it all the way around until the roll was empty. I pressed down on it, then tested it out, and it didn't really work. It was more like one of those train things. So I threw it and it landed right side up and still rolls. So one day I visited Soup Timmy, a Rubik's Cube artist, because a little while back he inspired me to make my own Rubik's Cube art, and I ended up making Shrek. But Timmy's like a Rubik's Cube pro, and he can solve a Rubik's Cube in under 10 seconds. I scrambled one for him, and it's almost as if he slows down time, because he got it done in literally 7.6 seconds. Then he showed me he can even solve one with one hand in 30 seconds while playing with a ping pong ball. He even has the fastest time while solving a cube hula hoop. I then had him mix up a cube for me, and then I beat his record, and finished off his giant art wall. Guess I'm just a pro. No, but for real, this stuff is insane. He even showed me a magic trick where he instantly solved the cube, then showed me this giant cube and a fidget spinner. So one day I went to Walmart to get a Power Wheels, but they were too expensive, so I left and got this used Viper that needed a battery instead. I went to the battery store and got what I needed, then went home, screwed off the seat, then put the new battery in, and screwed the seat back on, and got on it, and took off. And drove down the driveway and into the road where it wouldn't move. So I gave it a little push, and then I headed for the ramp where I made a massive jump. Then I drove pretty fast down a hill, but the problem was getting back up the hill. And we ended up having to carry it, and then I put it in my car and took it out to the country to really open it up. I drove out to the road and floored it. Gone I went, and then I ended up crashing. And I got up and ran into the field, leaving behind my awesome Viper. So one day someone commented for me to tie 4 bottles of Diet Coke and Mentos together and then throw it. So I got Diet Coke, Mentos, and tape, and then I was going to tie these 4 bottles together. I got the tape out, wrapped it all the way around, then put the Mentos in, one by one, and all the bottles, 3 each, then took it out of the cul-de-sac and threw it. And it did nothing. So I threw it again, and it did that. It was kind of a fail, but I just threw 2 bottles separate, and it did that, which was kind of cool. And then I wrapped 2 bottles together, thinking maybe that would work better, and it did a little bit, but not really. So then I threw another one, and yeah. So one day I ordered some heavy-duty water repellent to try and waterproof some things. It said it required 24 hours to dry, and I tried without letting it dry, and yeah. So I got a bunch of random stuff and started waterproofing. First with these shoes so I could run on water. Then this cardboard, then this paper, and then this random hat I found. And also this shirt, which would be great for rainy days. Then I let it all dry and came back the next day. And the cardboard kind of worked because the spray side was way more dry than the other side. And the paper also worked surprisingly well. Pretty dry. Then I put the hat on, and it kind of worked. And then I put on the shirt, which actually worked really well. The water ran right off it. Then I took the shoes on down to the creek, put them on, and tried to run. And it failed, so I walked back sad, and then failed at skipping a rock. So one day I got a comment that said to zip line into a ball pit. So I took my inflatable pool, dumped it out, cleaned it with water, and then poured all the ball pit balls I had into it. And when it was done, I jumped into it. And then got on the zip line to test it out. And I'm a pro, so don't try this at home. And then my brother went. Then I went again and hit my arm on the seat on the drop. Yeah. Comment anything else I should try. So one day I got a comment that said to zip line into an inflatable pool. So I ordered one on Amazon, opened it up, and then blew it up. Then I carried it over to a good spot, got a hose, but it was too short. So I got a longer one. I let it fill up and then went. Don't try this at home, by the way. And it kind of hurt. Then I almost fell. Let me know what else I should do. So one day I took my giant 140-pound rubber band ball to this hill to roll it down. And there's also a little jump at the bottom made of snow. I rolled it down and it just kept on going and going and then hit the jump. And here's a slow-mo replay. Wow. And then it zoomed off into the parking lot and just kept on going. It was going pretty fast, so I ran after it. And it went all the way into a soccer field. So I climbed over and look at the path it made. And it went all the way from there. So one day I got a comment saying I should drop my 110-pound rubber band ball in my saran wrap for it. But it's really heavy, so I got a tarp, tied it up with paracord, and then tried to lift it with a pulley system. And we ended up having to use a truck to get it up because it's too heavy. But we put it on the wrong branch and couldn't get it up from there, so we put it on a different one. Still couldn't get it up from there. But on the third time we got it, and I pulled it onto the fort and cut it open, and it was on there. It made it sag a lot, but I moved it over to here and then threw it off. What else should I try? part 2 of my saran wrap treehouse. So I was almost done, and I just kept on going for quite a while, nonstop. And I was leaving the middle undone so I could get on it, but I just had this tiny section to do, and I finished. And then I was ready to go inside the epic treehouse and test it out. I got on, and at first I thought the plastic was going to break, but when I spread myself out, I was chilling. And it was a pretty cool treehouse. Here it is from above, and it's a pretty sturdy thing. And when it's raining, you can just go under it like this. It even holds water. Look. And then it started to thunder. The full video is on my YouTube, by the way. Ayres. So one day, my family and I rented these cool scoot cars. I got in the green one, revved it up, and then took off. And traffic was kind of slow, so I stopped and beeped at a yellow one I saw. And then continued on down the coast. And my brother didn't like my driving that much, but I thought it was great. And we eventually made it to this curve thing where I raced my dad round and around. It was pretty hard to turn though, and I almost hit the curb. And my dad did hit the curb. Then I decided to ride passenger and just enjoy the ride and the view. And I saw a helicopter. Then we pulled up to this ice cream place where I got out and waited for my brother. Then went in and got ice cream that they actually rolled up and put into a cup and then handed to me. And it was pretty good. I then switched to the red car and drove out to a gas station where I filled it up and then drove it back. So after my last trip in my giant hamster ball, I threw it away because it was gross, and I actually ordered a new one that was bigger and better. It was really expensive, but it's massive. I blew it up all the way, and then I got in to test it out. And this one, you can just get in without airing it up while you're in. It was pretty big inside, and then I just ran and did a bunch of flips and stuff. And my last one, you'd get hurt if you fell, but this one has 2 layers, so it's cushioned. I ran out to the street and then just laid around for a second. And here's the inside perspective. Me doing a flip. I tumbled one more time and then let my brother go for a spin. He went out pretty far and then got out. Comment any ideas for videos with this giant thing. So one day I ordered this new hamster ball that I thought would be better to run on water with than my old hamster ball, but it was kind of too short, but I dealt with it and made my way down to the lake to test it out. I got exhausted in the way, but I eventually made it there, and I normally put my hamster balls in creeks where there's a current, and I didn't realize you needed a current or else you just stay in the same spot, so I couldn't make it to the dock. But it was still pretty cool inside, and I tried to spin as much as possible to get some more movement, but after a long while of spinning and doing a bunch of flips, I was making no progress. So I just parked it in the shore, got out, and then started skipping rocks sad. Let me know what else you should do. So one day I rented a one-man bucket lift to drop my 160-pound rubber band ball on top of stuff. And the first time I went up, I just dropped it on nothing to see how it would bounce. And here it was. Bounced pretty high. And remember, don't try this at home. Then we got out this car to smash. Here's the slow-mo. It put a pretty big dent in the roof. Then my dad went up and dropped it on it. And it put another pretty big dent in the roof. Then I moved onto the windshield and completely caved it in. Here's that slow-mo. And then I did it again. Here's an inside perspective. Yeah, the car was pretty crushed. And then I dropped Mentos and Coke. And this one was the best rocket I ever done in my life. Just look at it. Like if I should crush some more stuff. So I'm in a rubber band ball part 66, and the ball is huge. Look at me behind it. You can't even see me. And I put it on the scale, and it weighs 630 pounds. But we're going to get it even bigger and keep on adding bands. And my friend Brennan and I began placing bands for a very long time. And a lot of people say it looks like an egg now and not a ball, but it's very hard to keep it round because it's so big. And we try our best. And after we finished with the pile, I messed around with it, tried to throw balls on it, and then dunked with it. And I compared it next to this tiny rubber band ball and my head, then fell off of it, and took it back on the scale to weigh it in at 655 pounds. So, like if I should keep on going. So I'm now to rubber band ball part 67, and we actually made a couple more tiny rubber band balls. Here they are on a mini trampoline, and the big one was too big for it, so we just put it on the scale and weighed it in at 655 pounds. And now it's time to make it bigger. I dumped out a whole nother pile. Then my friend and I got to placing bands for a really long time. And the bigger this ball gets, the harder it is for it to look bigger, so we gotta add a lot of bands every time. And we finished up the pile, and then I wanted to test if it would go through a doorway, and it wouldn't. It's too big now, and I failed trying to get it back on the scale, so we had to both push it on the scale and weigh it in at 679 pounds. So, like, if you want me to keep on going. So one day it was rubber band ball part 68, and the rubber band ball is now almost 700 pounds, but today we're going to get it there. And somebody in the last video commented to get colored rubber bands, so I got these black rubber bands so you can see them placed on the ball. And the cool thing about 2 different colors is you can see them all going onto the ball, and it took us quite a while, but eventually we got it done. And the ball looks really cool now. It looks kind of 3-dimensional. Look at it. The black bands are more sleek than the other ones. And the ball is so massive. Look at it in comparison to my head. Then I zeroed out the scale and put it back on, and it weighed 706 pounds. So, like, if I should keep on adding bands. So I'm now all the way to rubber band ball part 70. It knocked over all these crates. Then I zeroed out the scale and weighed it in at 730 pounds, and it was time to add a bunch more bands. So my friend Brennan and I got busy placing this entire pile, which took so long, and we ended up taking a break and coming back the next day to finish it. But eventually it was done, and the ball is now even bigger. Look at it next to my head, me jumping on it, then me rolling it to Brendan, him rolling it back even faster, then dunking on it, and we weighed it back in at 755 pounds. So like if you want me to keep on adding bands. So it's now rubber band ball part 71, and this ball is insanely massive at 750 pounds, but we're going to make it even bigger. And this time half the bands are these half-inch bands that I've never tested before, so we'll see how they go. And the bands were just really tight, so we ended up moving the ball to see if it would make it better, and it did, because none of the bands had been placed on that side that much. And it also helped make the ball more even. But eventually, after a long time, we were done. The ball is huge. Here I am trying to stand on it and walk on it and almost fall. I dropped some Orbeez on it, threw a water balloon at it, and crushed a water balloon, and then weighed it in at 777 pounds. So like this video if you want me to keep on adding bands. So it's rubber band ball part 72, and the ball's a little messed up from a video that's not out yet, but it still weighs 775 pounds, so we're going to keep on adding bands. And this time I got these special blue bands, and we began fixing up the ball and making it look cooler with these blue bands. And we kept on rotating it, that way the bands would be spread more evenly and it would be easier to place the bands. And after a very long time we were done. I about crashed into the wall, then jumped on it and dropped my phone. Now, this ball is completely insane. Here's next to the little ball next to me, and then I struggled to put it on the scale, but got it and weighed it at over 800 pounds. Like if I should keep on going. So it's rubber band ball part 73, and I about knocked over a fan with it and struggled to make it over to the scale, but weighed it in at 800 pounds. But we're going to add even more bands. And the ball still looks kind of broken, so hopefully after we place all these bands, it looks a lot neater. And the ball is finally getting close to 1,000 pounds, which is what the scale maxes out at. And we kept turning the ball to make it as round as possible. And after a long while of placing bands, we were finished. And the ball does look a lot neater. I jumped on it like this. Then it accidentally moved the couch when I was trying to make it over to the scale. Brendan tried pushing it on, but failed alone. So we both had to push it, and it weighed 829 pounds. I then pushed it off and took it outside to show the cows. Yeah, they thought it was pretty cool. Like if I should keep on going. So it's rubber band ball part 74, and the ball won't fit through a doorway. It's over 800 pounds, and it's looking kind of rough. But we're on our way to 1,000 pounds, and we're going to get it there. We dumped out a bunch more bands, and we've been using this same band for a while. They still work on the ball, but we almost need bigger bands. We kept on placing until it was done. And it's actually getting hard to jump on because it's so tall. I pulled a stray band onto it, and then crushed this box, and then pulled it to the scale. And at first, the scale was acting broken, but eventually it weighed in at 842 pounds. So, like if you want me to keep on adding bands. So one day it was rubber band ball part 75, and I rolled it across the warehouse and then put it on the scale, and it weighed 842 pounds. We dumped out a whole bunch more rubber bands and got to placing. The ball is really heavy and hard to move around, so we do our best to not place the bands in the same spot and try to keep it as round as possible. We finished the pile, and the camera just doesn't do the ball justice. I've moved it to the distance to kind of get an idea of how big it is, and then I slammed into the ball, dunked on it, totally done. And then tried to move it with the hoverboard, but failed, so I spun around and put it on the scale. But we kind of broke it, and it wouldn't read. But it's probably 870. So it's rubber band ball part 76, and I tried to prove it weighs 870 pounds, but the scale's been broken, probably from the rubber band ball, but we're just going to keep adding bands anyway. We dumped out a huge pile of rubber bands and got to placing. And this really is a lot more work than it looks like, band after band for so long. We flipped it to make it cover the blue side, and then we were done. It looks really good, and it's probably within 5 pounds of 900 pounds. Here I am laying next to it and then jumping on it and trying to run on it. I pushed the ball, tried to get a run, and then fell, and then did it again. Kind of got one. Yeah, pretty cool. Like if I should keep going to 1,000. So it's giant rubber band ball part 77, and the scale doesn't really work anymore, but it's 920 pounds. We're so close to 1,000 pounds, and we're going to get it there soon. This pile weighs 25 pounds, and we placed the entire thing, which took quite a while, but eventually we were done, and I jumped on it, then sat on it, then laid next to it, then accidentally rolled it into the bang and drank it anyway. Like if I should keep on going. It's now rubber band ball part 78, and the ball is so close to 1,000 pounds. The scales broke, but the ball should be about 945 pounds, and we're placing a bunch more bands. We eventually rolled the ball to a higher point, that way it would be easier to get the bands around the ball. We did this for a while until eventually we were done. This band flew in the sky. The ball should be about 970 pounds, and it's huge. My friend Brendan did this, then I fell off it onto a beanbag, and like if I should keep on going. So I'm now to rubber band ball part 80, and I'm going to add all these rubber bands to my 970 pound ball. And after this video, the ball should be within inches of 1,000 pounds. And we don't know for sure the weight because my current scale is broken, but I have a new one that weighs up to 5,000 pounds on the way. Eventually, we finished the pile, and it looked like this. It's insane. I crushed a can, then drank the rest of it, and then here's it next to my head, and here's the broken scale. Like if we should keep on going. Now rubber band ball part 81, and I bought this new scale that weighs up to 5,000 pounds. It weighed the ball in at 990 pounds, and today we're going to get it over 1,000 pounds. I also wanted to try some different strategies, these big mover bands and looping these 12-inch bands. I thought looping these 12-inch bands sounded the easiest because you could just loop them together and then wrap them around. We dumped out a bunch of bands like this and then started looping. We looped for a while and decided to go ahead and place one on, and it looked pretty good, so we kept on going until we had the entire pile finished. We ended up with these two giant links of bands. We wrapped one all the way around it, which made me kind of dizzy, and then wrapped the other one until we were done. And the ball looked pretty good. We weighed it in over 1,000 pounds, finally. I was pretty excited. So now we just got to get to the new world record. Like if I should keep going. So it's giant rubber band ball part 82, and I got a sample amount of these giant green rubber bands to test them out. They work really well, but for now I only have these rubber bands. The ball's just over 1,000 pounds, and these bands barely work anymore. They're way too tight. We had to prop the ball up as tall as possible to even fit the bands, but after a long time we were done with the entire pile. It's a little wonky, but here it is. Then here's me jumping on it, rolling around a little bit, and jumping off. And it was time to weigh it in. We got it on the scale, and it was going back and forth between 1,020 and 1,040, like if I should keep on going. So this is part 83 of my over 1,000 pound rubber band ball. I bought a bunch more of these stretchier bands to try to put on the ball because they're a lot easier than the other bands, but they're way more expensive. And I put a poll on my YouTube to see if people wanted me to keep going or cut the ball in half, and 90% say keep going, so that's what I'm going to do. And if I want to beat the world record, I'm going to have to find a cheaper way to add a lot more weight really fast. And the scale wasn't really reading right because we kept knocking it off on accident, but the ball should be around 1,050 pounds. Like to keep on going. So it's rubber band ball part 84, and I got another big box with 5 5-pound bags of rubber bands. And since the bands are too big to get on the ball now, we're going to have to loop them into 2 giant strands like this. We spent about an hour doing this, looping the entire pile until we had 2 giant strands. And we didn't know the best way to go about putting them on the ball. We moved everything out of the way and then realized eventually if someone was standing on a chair and then we ran around, it was easy, but it made us really dizzy. Eventually we finished off the entire pile using this method, and then for the second pile, we moved the ball over a little bit to add bands on this side. And we figured out wrapping around like this was a lot easier and took like half the time. And the ball actually looks pretty cool now. I stood on it, then we pushed it onto the scale, and it weighs about 1,070 pounds, like if I should keep on going. It's rubber band ball part 85, and I dumped out all these 12-inch rubber bands to loop them together and place them around the ball. My friend Brennan and I spent about an hour looping 25 pounds of these bands until we had 2 giant strands. And since in the last video we finally figured out the best method to loop them around, that was the easiest part. Here's the final strand, and it didn't take that long until it was completely covered. I tightened it on the ball, and this is what 25 pounds looks like. And here's a painting of the rubber band ball, then me next to it, then up close. And to be honest, I don't know how to work this super expensive scale I bought very well, but between all the pounds of bands I've bought, it should weigh around 1,100 pounds. And it's a big ball, like for me to keep going. So one day I put my rubber band ball back on the zip line to crush some more stuff. I went to Walmart, got this thing, this lamp, this clock, and this other clock, and this weird picture. I put the lamp together like this, and then I first started with the alarm clock and shut it right off. Then hit it with a baseball bat. And then I did the other clock like this. And after that, we set up the picture of whatever this thing is. And it got crushed. Then we put this thing and put the GoPro inside, and it made a cool looking slow-mo. But there wasn't enough damage, so we did it again. And again. Just look at it, getting smashed. And then I just hit it with a baseball bat. Then hit the lamp. Let me know what else I should smash. So one day I took a Power Wheels to a fast food place. I got in and drove on up after a lot of struggle. And then I pressed the button to order my food.
I would like a corn dog and a large tot. All right, thank you.
Then a car drove by and said,
500. Thank you. My daddy bought it.
I then sat there, waved at the camera, then played with all the car's buttons. And eventually my food came.
A corn dog and a large tot.
Yep.
I'll get you an extra sauce.
All right, thank you.
Have a good rest of your day.
You too. Thank you.
Then I drove away with my food, and I think this is going to become my new go-to vehicle. And it was a good corn dog. So one day someone commented on my video with this giant dome thing and told me to put ball pit balls in it, so I put the whole ball pit in it. And it took a pretty long time having to air it up and move all the balls in, and then I had to move them from this thing to this thing until eventually they were all in the one big circle. And it looked really cool. I fell in it, then looked around, and then ran around, and then fell again, threw some balls at the camera, tried to run, and it wasn't that deep because it was so big, but let me know what else I should do with this thing. So one day someone commented for me to add rubber bands to my aluminum foil ball, and I thought that was an interesting idea, so I'm going to try it. But first I got to fill in these gaps with aluminum foil. I had the bands in a pile and then began filling in the gaps with aluminum foil and hammering it down until it was all good. And then I began placing these leftover rubber bands from the rubber band ball series, the colored ones and these ones. And the ball looked good enough for now. Here's it next to me, and here's me throwing it. And then me throwing the rubber band ball. Let me know if you want me to continue adding bands or foil or what, and like. So one day someone commented for me to put rubber bands on an egg, and I thought it'd be interesting to test out to see if the bands would protect it from a drop. I started placing the bands on the egg and then switched to a different pile because their bands were better. I kept placing them, double twisting each band because they weren't big enough. It got to this, and then I finished off the pile, and it looked like this. Pretty bouncy. And it was ready for a drop test. I took it out to the cul-de-sac and dropped it from waist high. And yeah, it completely cracked. I didn't really expect that, to be honest. I picked it up, let it go, and then walked off sad, like if I should do something else. So one day I wanted to see what all I could crush with rubber bands. So I went to Walmart and got a water gun, rubber bands, some Dr. Pepper, and a jug of water. Then I left and went home. I dumped out 2 bags of rubber bands, shook up the 2-liter, and started placing a lot of rubber bands on it. And then I just decided to go throw it, because I was scared it was going to blow up. So I threw it, and it didn't do anything. So I went and I tried again. And this time, it kind of worked. And it looked like this. And after that, I started on the water jug, alternating with my brother, because it was kind of tiring. And eventually, I started messing with the cap and accidentally made it come off. I was shocked. I drank some, and then I left and went inside to start on the water gun. I placed a bunch of bands on it and then realized it'd never break and left. So one day I wanted to race my brother down the creek, him on a duck and me on a whale, each with 1 oar. We put them in his truck and headed on down to the creek, where we walked out to the launching point, got on, and took off. And I fell. Then got back on and fell again. The whale wasn't very sturdy and I just kept falling and falling. So I stopped to air it up some more and then got back on, eventually. And I rode fast enough to catch my brother, and even pass him. And he also got stuck on a rock while I navigated on up. And I was the first person out of camera sight, so I won. I held my whale high while he drug his duck. And if you want to race people too, download this game I've been playing where you race people down a water slide. And can even knock people off. You can download it using the link in my bio. So one day I put my 150-pound rubber band ball back on the zip line to crush this car. And it was just a parts car my dad had laying around, so it wasn't a big deal. Pulled it back and threw it at it. And here's the slow-mo caving in that door. Then we saw a cat, and then I threw it at it again. And missed because we moved the truck, so we moved it again and threw it again. And this time it nailed it. It was a pretty big dent, but I still wanted more, so we did it again. And it knocked over the GoPro. Then we did one last go, and it was like the biggest dent yet. Let me know what else I should smash. So one day it was really windy, so I took this giant 6-foot water balloon and I tried to fill it up with air. I got my air pump out, filled it all the way up until it was pretty big. Then I stopped, zip tied it, tied a string around it, and ran around with it. It was pretty massive. I spun it around, threw it. It didn't pop. I kicked it, still didn't pop. And then I threw it up in the air, caught it, and we were best friends. I ran around, put it in my brother's truck, tried to shoot a basket with it, and then I bopped it with my head and bopped it a little too far and it popped. I was So one day I wanted to freeze a giant 6-foot water balloon in the ice cold. But the hose was frozen, so I tried pouring hot water on it. And when that didn't work, I put it in the hot tub. That got it to thaw out, so I zip tied the water balloon on and started filling it up. Here it is from the window. I decided to stop it here because we didn't know if too much would make it not freeze. And I struggled to get it off, eventually got it tied, and then here was it at night, kind of frozen. And then the next morning it was solid. I could put my foot on it and even stand on it. So we decided to cut it open. And it was a lot thinner than I thought, so I just smashed it a bunch. Like if I should fill up a bigger one and let it sit for longer. So one day I got this giant hamster ball, and the next day it was raining, so I decided to get in it in this air-up dinosaur suit. But first I got it in normally just to test out the rain with more mobility. I ran through this puddle twice, and then rolled around a little bit, ran a little bit, and rolled a little bit more, and then got in the dinosaur suit and got in. And it was a struggle because I couldn't really see where I was going, so I only moved around a little bit and then got out and almost hit my head. But I got out and then ran off and jumped in the air. Let me know what else I should try. So one day I wanted to hoist this giant water balloon up into this tree. So I went to Walmart and got a lot of paracord and a tarp. Then I went home and laid out the tarp and the balloon, and then I put the hose in and started filling it up. Until eventually it was big enough and I stopped the water, took the hose out and zip tied it. And it was pretty cool. We wrapped the tarp around it and then ran the paracord through all the holes. Then I climbed into the tree and threw the paracord over the branch as a pulley, but it was too heavy. So I unzipped it to let some water out and got in it and put my head in it. And then we let the water come out and we tried again, but failed again. So we attached the paracord to the truck and just broke the tarp. So then I let some of the water drain out and put it in a hammock and started filling it up back up again. And I sat on it and even laid on it. And then I started rocking it back and forth and it fell out. So I stood on it and then jumped on it and eventually it broke. Yeah. So sad. So one day I ordered all this stuff to make elephant toothpaste. I dumped out all the water, then added the first bottle, some food coloring, and the last thing, and it did nothing but fizz up a little. I guess I ordered the wrong thing. I kicked it and then blew the cap off. And then I went to Walmart to get the stuff to try again, and they were out, so I calmly left and went to a different store. And they sorta had what I needed. And I went home, added the peroxide, the dish soap, the food coloring, and the yeast. And just my luck, I think the container was too big, and it just foamed up a little. So I dumped it out, and then sang a new hit single.
Sometimes I don't want to be happy.
Then I touched it,
Elephants really brush their teeth with this stuff?
and bended it, like if I should try this again. So one day I got a bunch of helium to fill up this giant 6-foot water balloon and an air mattress. I filled up the balloon until I was out of helium, and then I let it go and grabbed it. Then I tried to see what it could lift, and not really anything. Then I punched it and kicked it and slammed it on the pool, which made it fly away like this. And the balloon just kept going off into the distance, and the next day it was time to try an air mattress. I filled it all the way up, and it didn't do anything. So I put it in the pool, threw the shovel on it, and hit it, and then sucked some helium up, and then so did my cameraman.
Part 61.
So one day I decided to fill a giant hamster ball up with water and get in it. I moved it to level ground and then put the hose in to let it fill up. Then I put some wood down so it wouldn't roll and let it fill. And here's the checkpoint. It's pretty cool looking, and I hit it on the side and then added some more air. And after that I let it fill up to this point. And I'm going to stop it when it gets to the zipper. And it got there, so I stopped it. Then I put some goggles on and unzipped it, but it broke. But I got in anyway. I went in and swam to the side, and I looked like a fish, and then I struggled to get out. Then I threw the snorkel and went back under with just the goggles, and it was pretty cool. I swam around, did a circle, and then did another circle, and then struggled again to come up. And it was kind of like a water balloon, so I jumped on it, rocked on it, flipped on it, and then swam on it. Let me know any other ideas you have for me to try. So one day I got a comment that said to fill my hamster ball with Orbeez in water. So I dumped a bunch of Orbeez in, zipped it up, and then let it air up. And once it was aired up, I added some water until it was done. Then I set it in this spot and let it set overnight and came back the next day and it looked like this. I deflated it and then messed with the Orbeez. And I'd never really even touched Orbeez, so it was pretty cool. I then got in all the way, which was really hot because it sat in the sun all day. And then just messed around with the Orbeez until it was all the way filled up. And then I walked around in it and then shaked all around in it like this. And then splashed them all. And then did a snow angel. I also went out on the road, ran for a bit, then got hot and tired and got out. Let me know what else I should do in it. So one day someone commented telling me to fill this dome thing up with water, so I was going to do it. My plan was to fill this section up first, and then get in the other section, zip it up, and let it fill all the way until I was releasing it. But it started to leak through, which was running my plan. So I had to release early, and let all the water out, and this is what it looked like. All the water did kind of rush in, and it made this cool little pool in the dome. It wasn't as much water as I wanted, but I still made the most of it, and then left. Let me know what else I should do. So one day someone commented to put Flex Seal on the Crown Royale bottle and then see if it broke. So I sprayed Flex Seal on it, gave it a good coat, then came back later and gave it another coat. And then came back later and gave it one last coat. And then it was time to drop it. I took it to the cul-de-sac and dropped it from waist high and it was fine. So then I threw it up in the air and it cracked a little bit. But the Flex Seal kept all the glass together, which was cool. Let me know what else I should do. So one day I got a comment that said to Flex Seal an egg and try to break it. So I gave it a coat of Flex Seal and then left and came back later to give it another coat. After that, I let it dry and then came back and tested it. And it didn't hold up. So then I had the idea to try a pumpkin. So I bought one at Walmart and then gave it a nice coat of Flex Seal. And then I gave it another one on the bottom after it was dry. And then I tested it, hitting it up against stuff. And it was pretty durable. So I threw it and it held up. So I threw it again and again. And it finally cracked. Then I threw it into the garden to try and grow a pumpkin patch. So one day someone commented that I need to put more coats of Flex Seal on the egg. So I Flex Sealed another egg and then put another coat on the other side. And after that I let it dry, then put another coat on. And then put another coat on. And then put one last coat on. And it was done and seemed pretty sturdy, so I tested it from a waist-high drop and it held up pretty well. So I went a little higher and it seemed a little bit mushed in. So I threw it up in the air and then it was like completely mushed in. So I just threw it up one more time for the heck of it. And it was crushed. So one day I decided to test Flex Seal on a bunch of random glass stuff. I started with this glass llama that's head fell off. I sprayed it with Flex Seal after putting the head on and then let it rest. I then broke this vase to Flex Seal it back together but ended up breaking it too much. So then I just made it stronger with Flex Seal. I then shattered a picture frame, which I guess Flex Seal can't really fix, but oh well, I still Flex Sealed it. And then I let it all sit out and came back when it was dry. And it had rained, but I think it still Flex Sealed and worked, because the llama was fine. It was super sturdy, and it held together. And the picture frame, yeah. But the vase before broke when I dropped it, and now it's super sturdy. These are decorations now. So one day I got a comment that said to Flex Seal a water balloon, so I got Flex Seal in a water balloon and filled the water balloon up. I shook the can and then sprayed it, and it popped. So I filled up another balloon, and it held up while I sprayed it. I finished it and let it sit, but when I came back, it was popped. So then I tried freezing one. It froze overnight, and the next day I took it out and Flex Sealed it. I sprayed it until it was completely black, and then I took it into the garage to dry, hoping it wouldn't melt. And it didn't, but the balloon still popped. Let me know what else I should try. Part 2 of floating down the creek in a hamster ball. So the current continued to take me away, and I eventually tried to stand up. But I just fell. And I just laid there, and the big current started to approach. And I fell again. I eventually tried to stand up again, and also fell another time. And just let the rapids take me away. And it was pretty fun, but eventually my brother pulled me in and I got out. I relaxed for a second and then began towing the hamster ball back upstream with my brother. And the cows were in the way, but eventually they moved and we carried it to shore and on up into the truck.